Welcome to Catch Up, a weekly show where we converse with amazing folks in DFIR, and today is no exception. Today I'm joined by Alissa Torres, incident responder and instructor extraordinaire. She's the author and lead instructor for SANS 4526 Memory Forensics in Depth, as well as the co-author of the SANS Memory Forensics poster. She teaches a slew of other courses for SANS. I'm proud to say she's a fellow Marine Corps veteran, and she's worked in incident response roles as well as taught in numerous other programs, from the U.S. Cyber Challenge Camps to the Defense Cyber Investigations Training Academy, or DCITA. She has more certs than you could shake a fist at, over seven or so GIAC certs, including GCFA, GCFE, GSEC, so the conglomerate one. And she's definitely one of the most captivating and engaging forensics presenters and teachers I've ever met. She's a mom. She has 2 teens and 1 new graduate. And I have to share that I once saw Alissa give this presentation, and I remember just being in awe the entire time, like jaw-dropping at how enthusiastically she was dropping knowledge bombs and sharing everything she knows. So with that, this is Alissa, everyone.
Hi, thank you for having me on, Jessica. What's going on? You've made me so embarrassed now. I don't even know what to say.
But you shouldn't be, because you're doing amazing stuff and it's inspirational to others, everything that you do. And that's on top of having your own business as well, right?
Yes, yes, it's true. Yeah.
So just truly inspiring that that you do all these things and really share your knowledge with the community. So to get started, how did you get here?
Good question. And I guess, you know how you edit the story depending on who you're talking to? I'm often asked, like, Alissa, how do I make my resume fit together? Like, how do I fold this into a story so it actually makes sense? I don't think real life is like that, but certainly when you're when you're retelling a story or applying for a job, it's essential to get that storyline down. But no, I'm a former Marine, as you were saying, and yeah, and they taught me electronic communications, but they also gave me the opportunity to go and get my MCSE. So I was like communications officer, but I went to the school in 29 Palms and got my MCSE, and I know it was just paper. It's like paper cert, but when I got out, I was able to get a job, help desk technician, network administrator, just kind of work my way up from there. But I met a lot of former law enforcement they were working in forensics. You mentioned the place, DCITA. And so at the time, the team was incredible. It just made up of very passionate forensic examiners who had drawn real world application. And they inspired me to take that route. One of my friends gave me his copy of Brian Carrier's file system forensic analysis book. It was all like he had taken notes, and it was all like, oh, dude, she has it. Ah! Yes, that's actually played a pivotal role in my career. So that book has made me who I am today. Thank you, Brian Carrier. Yep, thank you, Brian Carrier.
I've got to give a big shout out to Brian as well. I worked for Brian for 3 years. Some of the best tutelage I could have ever had in my career. Brian is fantastic. Oh, and that's like our Bible, right? Like that is.
And I've heard full body knowledge. Mm-hmm.
I've heard people go, "Oh, when is that book going to be updated? It's out of date." It's not. It's not out of date. Like, this is a really weird thing, because it shows you how to break it down, right? Like, it shows you how to dig deep into a file system, and it's not just about the particulars of the exposition in there, but like how it works.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And so you may think, if you're listening to this, I would never be able to read that book. So, it's like it's a little bit dry. Perhaps some of the viewers are thinking this. I will tell you why I had to read it. I was getting my IASIS CFCE at the time, which is a certification where you have to submit reports and have them reviewed by a mentor. And I had just turned in my forensic dongles because I'd left one job where it had dongles, licenses to use forensic tools, and I'd turned them in. And all I had to do that certification was Brian Carrier's book and the 10-15 seconds of forensics preview mode of WinHex.
Oh my gosh. So you were doing everything in chunks too.
Like, here it is, 15. I saw it. It was crazy, and this is back in the day, so things are better.
Well, but what an amazing way to learn, right? Because like doing things manually, having to work in WinHex, in a hex editor, you didn't have X-Way, you had WinHex, right? Which for people who don't know is the hex editor that X-Ways is built on. That forces you to understand things better, and that's the core fundamentals that's sometimes missing when people are only at parsed artifacts and not thinking about how do we get there. Right? Like, so that's awesome. I love that.
And then I went to work at Mandiant, and I had to figure out how to do the same thing in Mir, right? I mean, Mandiant Intelligent Response at the time. So that was, it took me a little bit longer to learn that tool than it did WinHex. But so right now I'm currently working as a threat hunter in healthcare and teaching for SANS. Both, I'm quite passionate. Just last night on discovery, as hacker discovery methods, and and how they can use forensic artifacts to figure out everything that's on the box, to figure out pattern of life studies and pattern of execution, so they can blend right in. And the Shrum was featured.
I gotta tell you, I love that. The intersection of using and having knowledge of the artifacts that you leave behind in order for attackers to blend in. So I'm married to a pen tester. I'm married to a red teamer.
Oh,
and so now, so I'm going to actually refer him to watching that. And so I'm always thinking about that intersection and the traces that are left behind and the things he's doing, because I want to be able to find them. Right. So,
oh yeah.
So I love that.
And then you come to understand that the red teamer or the offensive actor is digging into our data to figure out how to extend their dwell time, and just incredible. Or their next play, how they can in and immediately get some financial gain out of their compromise. It's fascinating. It's an arms race.
You would think that for a hacker to have an understanding more of artifacts to land better, because they're able to understand more of what's there in order to be able to execute their actions. That's really cool. I'm going to share a comment from Kevin that he just put in the chat. Kevin Pagano is he's a forensics examiner in corporate and a great blogger. And if you guys don't know Kevin, he's put out great stuff. Does really that when he went through his program, which I happen to know he went through Bloomsburg, that they only dabbled in hex for 2 to 3 semesters at the beginning of their forensic courses. So they really didn't get that depth that you got in that experience that you had doing that cert without tools.
Tools.
and I think that's important, right? That you can, it's not going to be as fast. Like, obviously on an engagement, you want all your tools of dongles that you were describing when you're on an engagement.
Absolutely.
But when you're learning, knowing that you can still do such an important thing to have, right?
It's empowering.
Like, to have that skill, it's empowering. And it means that you understand. And think about what that does for, when you encounter the unknown and when you have to defend your report. That's just awesome. Exactly. I love that you had that experience.
One of the messages. Sometimes tools fail, particularly with the games Microsoft is playing with. This version of Windows 10, the next version of Windows 10. I call them games, but they're really heartache and pain.
Oh, and now they're not even giving us clear names so that we can speak about them clearly.
No, got to build strength.
Build numbers.
Mm-hmm. It's good, though. Keeps us sharp.
It keeps us always learning. So what are you working on now? What's kind of your projects right now?
Sure. I'm very excited to finish up the last revision. I call it the Forensics 526 reboot. I've just turned in, I think, of the 18 labs, 9, maybe 10 of them are brand new for forensics in the SANS curriculum. So we mentioned Windows 10, but really changes started transpiring quite dramatically with Windows 8. So we have like partial memory images to now embrace Windows Debugger. I know some some people were doing this early on, you know, like Windows Debugger, the best tool. It's native and you can bring in the symbols. But if we have one of those fast boot or fast startup, or we have a partial crash dump, I mean, there's so many dump. Like Windows Debugger is going to be the only tool for the job, unless you're running strings and Magic Man. But I'll say a lot of the new content has focused on Windows Debugger, process memory acquisition, because it's so expansive.
Focusing on process memory, and I'll tell you why. Like in the law enforcement world, you can get process memory before somebody says I revoke consent.
Wait, what?
Because you can do a process memory dump in under 20 processes. And so even if you're on scene and you start doing a process memory dump, I just love the idea of doing that before your full RAM collection, because if you get the data, the fact that now you're delving into the stuff that you can get out of the process memory, it's sometimes the quickest, and it may be your only access if you've got a very limited time on scene. So I think that's awesome.
Absolutely. You're right there with me.
I'm right there with you, because so many people don't even think about collecting running processes first. And also, if you have something malicious going on right now, guess where it's going to be? Like, it just helps you cull down. Instead of looking at possibly 16 gigs of RAM, now you're just looking at that process dump of what's happening now. Like, it's going to help you. Love it. I mean, I just love that you spend in memory, because I can't tell you the number of people who don't collect it and don't look at it. And it's just so critical. So I love it. I'm so excited about your new class, and that's really cool with the number of new labs. So that's just phenomenal.
Thank you. Yeah, we pivoted day 6 to every student has their own virtual range, their own compromised virtual range in Azure. New for SANS with the virtual cyber ranges. We have only done it in a few classes, so we're going to be one of the 526 day 6.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, we'll see. AVML, my chosen tools for acquisition. So.
No, I love it. Yeah. I love it. And I really am excited for anyone who takes your class, because getting that experience with new, and you know what, in all honesty, it sounds like it's a class worth taking again with that many new labs and new systems and refreshing. I love the fact that you're always building.
Thanks. So, love talking about it. It's my baby. Yeah.
So what is kind of your go-to resource? Doesn't physics related, but where do you kind of go?
Sure. I always direct students. I'm training agnostic. I'm tool agnostic. But I always direct students to Pavel's training in plural sites, just because I'm a Windows internals junkie. So Pavel has the Windows internals, like 3 classes, Windows internals, and then he's genned up Windows 10 internals. And you're like, that's nerd stuff. Yeah. And it's not forensics. He's just showing the OS. But of course, bated breath for the 2nd volume.
Yes.
Edition 7. There's volume 1. Yeah, but volume 2 is coming out in a month.
Hold on. Pull volume 1.
She's got it. She's got volume 1. She's disappeared.
I don't see it on my shelf. I think this sounds weird. I think I had it in my to-go bag, because at one point there was a book club that David Cowan was running, and we were actually going through it. I think from doing that, it's actually in my to-go bag and not on my shelf right here, which is really, really nerdy, is when you're sitting in the airport reading that book. But you're right, it's not a forensics book, but holy crap, does it make you understand things better.
Yes.
So that's a fantastic resource. So that's a resource, a book, but what brings you inspiration?
I just closed out a class on Saturday, the advanced incident response class. That's the forensics 508 new Stark Research Labs data set. And I say new, it's been out for a year. Some instructors may not like this at all, but it's online. So we're engaging via Slack, all of the students, and they're just this past week, they came forward with so many questions that you probably know what I'm talking about when I say connector questions.
Yes.
Like they were taking what they already knew, listening to what I was saying, and like shooting off into outer space. And I was like, dude, this is it. I mean, building connections, and people are just jumping on what they know to incorporate the knowledge that the class is actually imbuing. So I was like, it's hard because you're like, wow, I've never thought of that. And you have to say it a couple of times over and let's research it together. But that is so inspiring to see students engaging with the content. And you got to find, as an adult learner, you have to find a way to incorporate new concepts. Oftentimes, the best way is to figure out how it relates. I think some of the best instructors, fantastic analogies, right? Like they relate to railroad tracks or pulling weed. When you hear students doing that, you know you're right in the zone, and that is very good. What about you?
You know what? They're clicking. Like I just want to pause on that and say, like, when a learner look at something and you then relate it to something else, and then you go back to the instructor. And I mean, when I teach, I get the same thing when they come back and they say, instead of just saying, oh, so this artifact in this database, like they're getting it like that. That's one thing. But when you get it and you turn around and you relate it to your carburetor, because that's where your hobby is, like, which is not where mine means, that you're seeing it in a different light, you're making those connections and you're getting it. And I think you're right that is super, like, it's such a good tell when students engage that way. And you asked me back what inspires me. And you know what? I'm in a very similar vein. I'm usually inspired by students who are just getting into forensics when they start sharing back. Like, it super motivates me when somebody who's new to the field finds new things. They get that bug. They realize that not everything's been discovered. Yes. They don't have to just do what's in the book or what's in the course or what their teachers told them, that they themselves can go out, do some research, which is not that complex, right? Like just look at a new artifact, look at something nobody's ever looked before, say, what is this? Do some testing, prove it, and then shares it with the community. When somebody who's new shares to the community, when I see a new blog, that inspires the heck out of me. And sometimes it's just new ways that they correlate things. I'm sorry, I'm getting super super.
Right.
I'm totally inspired. James Duffy, the last couple of weeks, he's put out all of this stuff. I didn't even know he existed till May. He's 19 years old. His blog says so I'm not like giving out any personal identifiable front page of his blog. But he's putting out tools. He's working on iOS emulation. He's doing little videos explaining SEP. Like, I'm like, wow, go get it. That's awesome. I can't. Yeah. And then it inspires those of us who've been doing it a while. Oh crap, am I putting out enough content? Where's my new research? And then I get the bug, right? It inspires all of us. And I am totally motivated by those who continue to find new things. Like, look at Sarah. Like, Sarah, look at you. You're always pondering and finding new things and correlating things. And that's what's about. So every time somebody else shares something they find, especially when they're new, because once they get that bug and once they get over that hurdle, it's just, that they're going to get it. And I see Kevin saying sharing is caring. And I remember Kevin sharing his first blog when he first started his Stark Forensics blog. And I was like, motivated. And like Elon Wright with her D for Diva blog, where she's sharing things for other new people to the field as she's been here a year. Like, that just, my forensicator brain going, yes! So it inspires me. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, I see that too. It gives me a bit of motivation to continue the pursuit. You just, in this field for too long,
absolutely,
without picking up something new and continuing your education, and that is just an incredible lesson.
I love what Brett just wrote. He said that's the key to DFIR. 1, search the internet for the answer. Yes. 2,
yes.
If not on the internet, figure it out. 3.
Yeah.
Post
Oh yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I love that. And I would like to say that also when you search the internet and you find the answer, post about your application of the answer, because your application is slightly different and you may have found a new way, or even more important, you're validating. And validation helps anybody who has to go to court. So if you can share your validation, that's cool too. So even if you use something somebody else said on it, like none of us have figured it all out from the beginning, except for maybe Warren Cruz and Brian Carrier, because like they like started at the very beginning, Harlan's registry work, like the work that, but the rest of us were all building on other people's stuff. So share more power to that work that was originally done, like reshare that resource, but then show how you apply it and add to it. Like if you look at a white paper from an academic organization, all of those resources in the back that are listed, we need to do that more as our practitioner community. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's incredible. That's why I refer people. Well, okay. You refer people to MITRE ATT&CK for a lot of different reasons. But every time I'm showing a student, I'm like, it's the references here. they attribute all of their knowledge. Their references are incredible. So pivot, 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 and continue to study. It's great. Great.
I love that. I love that.
Oh, yeah.
And I think really is contagious to your students as well. So I love the fact that you're able to share that and share that with related stories and drive all of that feeling where they then combine everything and get it and demonstrate it. So I think that's fantastic. So getting to your analysis and the work you've done, is there an experience you could share about an interesting case or some interesting work you've done before?
I will share with you. We tell lots of fails. You've been in my class before, and I share all kinds of fails on my professional journey and big exposes of like connecting a non-sanitized drive to a proof of concept machine and thinking I could dump a clean memory image with a removable drive that was half full of sensitive. What happened? Of course, the file system loaded into the target machine's memory. These are just sample sets. So all of the MSC records from the drive contaminated the collection. And this was for Enfuse. So my coworker and I were going to present the Mixed Martial Arts Challenge. It was like a bingo board where if you got all of the questions correct in like PCAP analysis or host-based analysis, you would get like a signed book. Speaking of Harlan, he signed some of the books for us. But no, when I went to play incident responder to our compromised machine, I had a hard drive, plenty of space. So I connected it with my acquisition tools, ran FTK Imager, dumped memory, acquired the volume, and my buddy was responsible for capturing the PCAP of the attack. Came back, his name is Nick, N-I-K. He says, before we go live with this data set, let's run the keyword searches for our names to make sure we don't have any personal information on there, like everything's on the up and up. So he ran his name, no hits. Think of it, N-I-K, no hits. And then he ran my name and it was like poof, lighting up like fireworks. Oh! This was somewhat early days. I'll say somewhat early days, but
you checked, right? Like that's one of those things you've got to do. You've got to grep and make sure your personal data isn't in there, especially when you're sharing data sets. And you've got to, the thing is, I know that sounds horrible, but if you are working on your home network, especially if you're doing stuff with mobile, you are going to release, unless you do things very, very sanitized, like don't do on your home network, don't do these things at your personal geolocation, particularly with mobile, because you don't know everywhere data is. Like we were saying before, there's always new discoveries. There's stuff that you don't know, and you don't know how it's encoded, and your PII will be there. So you just need to be very careful.
The MFT record loaded from the removable device and all of the directories and files. I mean, it wasn't like the files loaded into memory did. So when I dumped memory, all the file names or directory names, and that's where it was like there was a directory called Alissas stuff, even worse stuff. I think I even had a job offer letter that had loaded into memory. Like that's just like the metadata for it, but that was enough. So guess who's a couple of weekends rebuilding the entire lab? It was me. But lesson learned. So, we all start off somewhere, and I would say the cost is not that I didn't know what I was doing, but I had a set process where I was at my last job, and then you roll into a different set of circumstances, different conditions, and it's an entirely different incident that I'm responding to. And so you didn't game the game and think about how the method that you employed to triage would leave behind artifacts. It's so important.
So, what you're bringing up is so important for a couple of reasons. Number one, you are a hero to many in forensics. And to hear the simple statement when they do things that they see as a mistake. And I think it's so important for people to know that. Number two, your process of validating and verifying and checking what you had done. People don't do that. And number three, what you're saying about playbooks and SOPs is critical when you go to a new organization. I usually tell my students, if you show up in a new lab and there's no SOP or playbook, you have two choices, right or run.
Yes.
And because that is what you're going to be held to. That is going to be what CYA, right? Like that's your cover your butt document. And it's also going to be what you and the rest of your team are doing things consistently, that you thought through these possible errors that can happen in triage, etc. I give my students in my class a choice of 3 projects to do new research and publish, review existing research, and or to write an SOP, because some people can't publish. But writing an SOP is definitely the hardest of those, but it's like you are going to grow so much. And I've had so many students say the SOP I wrote in your class is now the SOP in my lab. It was adapted into, and I'm like, yes.
That's
but the
incredible.
reason is because they're taking that write or run thing. And I think what you said there about the playbook, like if you walk into an incident response team and they don't have a playbook, take that on, man. And even cooler, like there is great resources to start.
That's true. That's true.
Actually, I know Brett's watching, and I wonder, Brett, if you could just sample playbooks and SOPs on DFIR training. I know that there are some on SWGD. MITRE has some out there, right? Don't they have some playbooks out there? I'm trying to remember if they had some public. But
all of the SOAR products. All the SOAR products make those.
Exactly, all the SOAR products. But if you don't have one, make one. And borrow from other people's. Learn.
Right.
What a good lesson. Thank you for sharing. Totally. So what's something people wouldn't expect about Alissa? Do you have something you do outside that's...
Oh, something I do outside. I have 2 dogs, and actually one of them I forced on my kids. The youngest, he's a year old. So I know if you follow me on Twitter, you can see pictures of Chase, but he is a wild man. So he actually helps me out in the yard. I do a lot of weeding. I'm like a yard work junkie because it's meditative. So he will weed with me. He pretends to help me. It's ridiculous. So. Yep.
I love that. And I love that you're into doing yard work, because it gives you that outlet, right? Like you need that outlet. It's just awesome. And there is kind of where you, by having outlets other than forensics, you're able to build these you were talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't have other things, you don't have to get those analogies, and it actually helps you learn content better, which is kind of weird. So I love that. I love the I love the getting out there and weeding. I use that as a parenting tool. When my children are maybe doing things they shouldn't on video games, they weed. So I don't do it.
I've heard this. Yes, I've heard this. And they'll remember that. I was just talking to my stepbrother and stepsister, and they were remembering that their dad and mom used to make them go out, fill a bag full. I mean, that was the outer limit there.
And I remember doing that as a child as well, but picking up sticks like before you mow. It's okay, guys, we got to mow. You've been on the computer computer too long, go pick up sticks.
Absolutely. Yep.
So you're a better woman than I that you do it yourself. So
it's fun.
I kind of think that a lot of your story is inspirational, but obviously things have changed a lot. And I know that Ali is also asking here, saying that he wants to know our junior in forensics, and just overall, what would be your advice to someone looking to get into the field in general?
Yes. So this is like two questions there.
Oh yeah, I know.
Like best tips. What I noticed when I was working at Mandiant, and I'm another epic fail, but no, I wasn't the incident lead for a particular engagement with our customers. They just assigned me a host, and I was fascinated. I love to interview your purists. You know what I mean? Like they love the artifacts. They're not necessarily about the accolades and the cash and the training, but they want some good stuff. They want some good investigations, and I love that. The folks that have the passion and want to know more. And so I had the passion and I wanted to know more. So I was digging through event logs of this one system I was given, and the incident lead malware. But I was focused on event logs, counting how many times our attacker had run net and IP config and like all of the other things that he had run. But there was an order and a priority in which I was supposed to proceed by customer limited hours. They're only going to pay us in the hour.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I had to recognize that I have this incredible drive, curiosity, and a drive to figure out how things work. And if you're providing we're an internal team and we're providing threat hunting services or incident response services, oftentimes we have to address our customers first and compose those deliverables. We ask the question, what does the customer need answered? And so, the incident lead hit me up and said, where's the malware? And then he went silent. And maybe 90 seconds later, he popped back up and said, I found it, never mind. And I was like, learn there. If you're currently in the forensics realm, in incident response, always take a step back and ask, what is the most pertinent, the highest priority question, because the cadence of these meetings, they come so quickly where you have to deliver an update that if you get waylaid in the weeds or you go down a rabbit hole and lose that focus, you won't have the information to make your boss look good in front of the board, to make it look as though everything's well in hand. So that is if you already have the job.
I totally agree. I've had a similar experience. I worked as a consultant at EY for a while, and the scope of the engagement, they wanted to know, it was, a case where somebody was doing some activity they shouldn't have done. And that's a very generic term if I'm not sharing the case details. One of the first steps I had done in the investigation, because web history was important to this investigation, was I had ran IEF, created a simple report, sent it off, and was writing my plan. And it was under an hour. I was writing my plan of what I was going to do next. I was really excited about some investigative stuff I was going to be able to do on this box. And I set off my plan, and they were like, that's it, Jessica, that case is done. Next thing. And I just remember being heartbroken. I was like, but I had this amazing plan. I wrote up this detailed plan of what I was going to do next that we should propose to the customer that would prove undoubtedly that the badness had happened.
Yes.
And instead they were happy enough because they were able to show the web history and just get the person to go, yes, I did the bad. And it wasn't that I broke scope. It's that I was heartbroken that I couldn't do the things I wanted to do, and I had to move on to the next case for the next customer. And
I get it.
Yeah, it sounds silly, but it is one of those important things when you're first starting out, that you're there to answer the question. And with the amount of intrusions, the amount of evidence in law enforcement, you can't spend the time you'd want to learn all the things, to deep dive and go find that interesting thing. Yeah. Enough is enough. If you find the evidence you need, sometimes that's all you have time for.
Yes.
So that is a critical share. I appreciate that. Somebody should have told me that when I was younger.
But I also say choose a favorite. If you're trying to get a job method of code injection, choose a favorite web application tool that you can go deep on, right? If you're trying to get a job as a forensic examiner, choose a favorite, take the red poster from Stan's website, the evidence of, and choose a favorite one in each of those categories so you can go deep. So then you can talk ad nauseum about one of these incredible artifacts, and you can fold it into how it would feed your investigation. And then like having that conversation with the team is going to be like, I think that's if you can go deep in something, it exposes passion as well as knowledge. And I think that's what people are looking for, particularly for entry level positions.
You know what? I think that's critical because I think people are afraid that they're going to have a question. I was going for a job as an engineer once, and in the interview, I walked out and I said, "Oh my gosh, I just had a digital fundamentals final verbal." Like that's what I felt like.
Oh.
Like you know what I mean? Like I walked out of the interview and I felt like, and I learned a lesson from that. And I learned a lesson when I later was the person who was interviewing candidates.
Right.
And that was that you can't expect everyone to remember exactly how everything works and what the answer is. And someone on an interview is nervous and they might not be able to give you an exact definition of a shell bag or whatever. So I'm gonna tell you what it was. I was asked a question, and instead of knowing the name of the part, like I couldn't remember what you called the part in this question. And there were two interviewers. And I turned around, I honestly said, I can't recall the name of that component. However, and then I completely described the function electronically of the component.
Nice.
And so and the one gentleman said that's wrong. It was like good cop, bad cop. And then good cop turned around on the interview and said, who cares if she knows the name, if she can explain how it works? And so I encourage everybody who, when you get a gotcha question on an interview, don't be afraid to let where your studies were. So maybe I'm interviewing you for a position and I'm asking you specifically about shell bags, link files, prefetch, and you turn around and you go, you know what? I'm going to be 100% honest. I did all that stuff in university, and I did do Windows forensics investigation. I've been spending it actually on Android, and I'm happy to go into a really in-depth explanation of Android usage stats. They will be blown away. Your interviewer will respect that. Right. You're right. Like they're going to respect that. And you don't need to know how to, for an entry level question, you don't need to know how to do the exam. You need to know how to think. Right. And if you can prove that now maybe not all employers are minded like Alissa or I, but I really think that if your answer is no anyway to everything they're asking you, and it could be because of nerves, go in there and just tell them what you do know about. Flip it.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. One of my questions that I would ask is gain point of presence inside our environment. And I wasn't really looking for anything in industry specific when I was trying to build this SOC team. I was just looking for, well, you employ people, so you have employee data. Like it could have just been bare bones, bare minimum. You have CPUs that have friggin' cycles to give. An attacker would just be to access your network resources. So I know you're exactly right, though. You get nervous and you freeze up and you don't even describe that which is easy within reach. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think you keyed in on something else, which is kind of like have your thing. Like go delve into something, love something, find what that thing is. And what you were saying, like find that artifact, find that injection point, find that, and just know that. I'm not saying you won't have to know other things for your job, but if you're looking to get into something, like it is so important to know something well and be able to show depth. I love that that concept. Is there any other advice you'd give when somebody's new to demonstrate that? Like, how do you get the interview?
Oh, how do you get the interview?
Yeah.
I'll share with you. This was 15 years ago, 10 years ago, but between the two, I got my NK certification, and that allowed me to get past the recruiter. It qualified me for the job. And, I was in the process of getting grad, was in nursing. I had IT experience, right. A nurse that went into the Marine Corps because I didn't want to be a nurse. So very, convoluted. That's why I say everyone has a story.
Yes.
It's just how you present the story. And maybe people ask about my nursing degree. That was a long time ago. So no, I would say, we and I know there are incredible opportunities for blogging your knowledge. Oh my gosh, these days, local industry conferences and virtual conferences, they call for papers. It's not as hard as it used to be to get in and what is it, hang out your shingle to get picked up for a virtual conference. Not as hard as it was 10 years ago because there are so many more. So this is a good thing. Don't think that you can't put it out there and submit.
That's a really good point. There's B-sides. There's if you find that thing and you research it, there are lots of different conferences, and there are conferences that are blind. Like, I'm going to tell you that look for conferences that are blind. There are some really great posts. I think Nikita put out a really, really great post about writing your CFP. And that's because she gives you a formula and tells you to break it out in time. And I will tell you that I spend a lot more time on abstracts, make sure I have a skeleton outline, and I've done the research before I do it. But when blind ones are the best because nobody knows who you are. So if you see a conference that does blind CFPs, like Circle City Con, I know does blind CFPs. I think ThoughtCon does. Like, those are ones where it doesn't matter if anyone knows who you are. It matters what your research is. And all conferences should be that way. But I will say we had a ton of student presenters at the Magnet Virtual Summit who were learning and were sharing what they learned. We've had, and it's a really great, because then you have a freaking presentation at a conference on your resume.
Right. Yes.
And you brought up a good thing about certification. So I'm going to ask a loaded question. Why did you, at that time, 15 years ago, what made you decide that the ENCE is my foot in the door? My degree doesn't match.
I was trying to get a job as an employee investigator. So I knew I needed it in order to qualify. Nowadays, it was a long time ago, so I'm not sure what you need nowadays.
So that was what was required at the time by the job postings.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of the key, right? Like, if you look at the postings for the jobs you want, start looking at what their requirements are, and then look for which certs are more applicable. What does the job require?
I actually have a job posting that I printed out. I'm doing the exact same thing that what you just described, and I've been in the field 20 years here, so I'm like, that's my dream job. What do I need in order to qualify? Because I'm gonna have to check all of these boxes and then some. And like, my resume is up there. On top of my resume, it says build it.
I love it.
I'm like having to learn how to use new tools in my new job. So it's like, it's ridiculous, but if whatever motivates you, whatever drives you forward, and sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's frustration, and I think we.
I'm gonna hit on one thing that I know you and I have talked about previously, which is sometimes I feel like people do get caught in that, because I'm just gonna contradict something I just suggested, which is maybe don't feel like you have to tick every box to apply. Because there are so many job postings that make no sense, that no one is going to have every single one of those out the gate. So if you have a substantial amount of the things that they're looking for, just because you don't have experience with X tool, and sometimes X tool is proprietary or only exists in one environment, or costs lots and lots and lots of money, but you've used a tool that does the same function, that doesn't mean you shouldn't apply for the job, right? Because you can prove you can do it. No. Like, and Alyssa's like, okay, maybe I don't have to do all that work. Maybe I should apply sooner.
I'll go apply
now. But sometimes, like, it's good when you're first getting a job to know what certs are the ones that are required. I would also say, if the job doesn't require a cert, there is definitely value to getting the job, and then somebody will sponsor your cert, right? Like, It's no joke. SANS courses are not cheap, right? Like classes to get certs are not cheap, but try to talk to your employer. A lot of employers will give some or all to training depending on. So sometimes there's a little bit of a catch-22, right? You need the cert for the job, but you really can't afford the cert and you want the job to sponsor the cert. Right. But if you demonstrate, and every employer is different, but still try, right? Still go for it. There's no reason not to just put yourself out there. Right?
Yeah, like, it's true. We bought now it's the second advertisement for them, but we bought the Pluralsight subscription and then would pay for, say, a CompTIA cert. And if you took the CompTIA cert and you passed it, then you get to go to the next expensive content. And like, so you have to prove that you're willing to invest in yourself. And then, you're more of a winning horse in the race. But okay, fair. You don't, certainly, I think what the studies show that women feel like they have to have all of the checks in the job requisite before they apply. And okay, I'll go apply now. You're right.
See, this was the motivation.
You're right. Sure.
And also, but so if you're listening to this on audiocast, Alissa has her resume behind her, pinned to her wall with the words "Build It" on it. And, I'm going to say that the value to that is the fact that there's already something there. She's not working from scratch, right? Like you have content. And I think that that's so important. I would suggest to everyone, now this sounds crazy, right? Like update your resume or CV all the time. Like I have a master CV and you'd be surprised at the things you need it for. So for example, I went to join AFS, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, and I needed to submit a full CV, right? So sometimes these can help you without, a resume can help you in ways that aren't just about looking for a job. And I would say more of a CV than a resume. And it's very, very valuable. And even for if you're in a corporation or if you're in a consultancy or if you're a contractor, a lot of times you'll need updated resumes as new work's being bid on. So constantly update every blog post you write, every CTF you win, every thing that you participate, every piece of training you're taking. Please ensure that you're putting those on your CV. You can cull your CV then to tailor it for a particular job application, but track it all. Don't stop.
Yeah, keep it up to date. And speaking of winning CTFs, I've been through a lot of SANS classes, and I joke with my students, I've never won a coin in class. And I can't use the grandfather clauses, we didn't have coins. No, I joke and I blame it on the other team members that I have on my basics challenge. But honestly, not all of us are fast. Not all of us are mentally structured to engage in a CTF. I love it. I love developing CTFs, and but I'll say I have gained so much by participating. So I'm always up for the challenge. Please never be kind of like turned away because you're not going to win. I think that's just a Because I will put my hand up and say, I've never won, but I can talk to you for days on code injection and flip over and then talk about the artifacts left behind. So just hey, it's not a direct correlation.
Right? Like winning a CTF has nothing to do with the knowledge you gain. And I would say everyone should do CTFs. Almost everyone who builds CTFs, and I know you build CTFs, I know I've built CTFs, we always put questions in for all levels.
True.
And we always put questions in that help you build your skills.
Yes.
And then I would say one of the most critical things is people like Kevin and several others, they'll do write-ups after they do a CTF. So you can go and learn how other people do things. I gotta tell you, so I wrote a CTF, the MVS CTF that just went last month. And then I read the write-ups. There's 15 write-ups out there on different people and how they solved, and people solve things that I didn't think of. When I wrote the question, I had no idea to solve it the way that they did. So I learned about new tools and new methods, and I wrote the darn question. Really, really, really awesome. Hey, it's an awesome way to share. And by the way, some of the people who wrote up how they solved the CTFs, they were not the winners. They did not necessarily even get every question right. They shared how they did it. And if that's somebody who's new, that's a way, right? So you don't have to win the CTF, but if you share your methodology and put out a blog on that, that's going to help you. Lori just asked, and I'm going to ask you what you thought about this. She says, how about asking a peer review to your CV?
Ooh, yes. There's Diana initiative has an element of that. That's the kind of, I guess, would you say industry conference that side saddles or goes along with DEF CON? Is that the same time as
Yeah,
DEF CON?
Diana Initiative runs at the same time as DEF CON.
Mhm.
It is for women, non-binary primarily. And they do a couple of things. They do so I've attended, I've spoken at that conference I've before.
Oh, no
They
way.
do
Cool.
they do resume reviews. I've done them there. It's fantastic. They usually have somebody there and they do free headshots for people who need them for like their LinkedIn profiles. And I actually think really, really cool because I don't know anywhere else that does that. Leslie, oh, oh my gosh, why am I forgetting? Leslie Carhart.
Yeah.
She, Hacks for Pancakes, does amazing resume clinics at several conferences a year. I've seen them at everything from B-sides, so they're sometimes at local conferences, but in all honesty, I think it's great, Lori. I think that it's great to have peers or other people who you're not applying to the job from, because I'll tell you something, we tend not to want to talk about ourselves very well. So especially if it's somebody you know, sometimes they can ask you questions or remind you, well, didn't you do that thing? And they're like, oh, that wasn't that important. No, put that on there. Put that thing on there.
Absolutely.
Or,
Right.
So it's
true.
good, especially, yeah. So I 100% encourage peer review of CVs. And even if it's just a friend, right? Like who's also, if so, a classmate who's working in DFIR with you, if you're studying together. That's awesome. Yeah. Very cool. Very good question, Lori. Any final thoughts, Alissa?
Any final thoughts? I'm super psyched to be here with you today. I think, I've learned a lot from the conversation. Yeah, exactly.
I love you, Alissa. We're giving each other heart hands here.
Yes. Yeah, I've taken away a lot, and thank you very much for always inspiring, and your energy is incredible. So you light up a room, and I appreciate it. I really do.
That's way too kind. I need to encourage everybody who's listening, if you ever have the chance to see Alissa speak or to a presentation or to take one of her classes, you will never meet somebody who is not only engaging, but has put so much thought and effort into the material to make sure that you're going to understand it, that that she's going to present it well, that it's going to click. And she's going to give you more content than you expect. So just open your mouth and drink from the fire hose, and then let it simmer, and then go back over it, because you are going to just get a ton of content, a ton of energy. And I've never met somebody who was as enthusiastic about making sure that the training she gives is realistic, is what you need, the depth you need to actually be able to do the work. So I just encourage anyone to do that. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom with us today.
I enjoyed it.
I think I really have enjoyed chatting with you. You inspire me all the time with the amount of depth you put into everything and the energy and passion. And I've never seen you not look like you were having fun up there when you were delivering.
Well, very good. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you for the inspiration. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone who was in the chat. We really appreciated you being here. And please join us for our next episode of Cash Up. Really excited for next week, where we'll be chatting with David Cowan. Thanks, everyone.